Okay, so we're here. We're lucky enough to have one of my best friends, the amazing Susie van der Vorst, here. And so yeah, we just came back from an OG, the original gangsta, the Orton Gillingham conference. So you're in town and you got a 12-hour ride. So
I do.
So we're going to talk with you soon. A couple things. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
I'm happy that you're here. And a couple things. Who's this person?
This is the infamous Diana Hanbury King.
This person is how you and I know each other.
That is correct.
And you have a mystery that you're going to reveal later today, because my chief legal counsel told me never ask a question that you don't know the answer to. But today, you know something I don't know, which is fine. I mean, I suppose I should know it. Okay. So anyway, so how did you meet her? First, yeah. How'd you meet her? You grew up in St. Croix.
Well, I grew up the first 9 years in St. Croix, and then I grew up in South Salem, and then in Pound Ridge. So when I met Diana, I lived in Amenia, because I had already been hired by Ron Wilson. So did you ever hear that story?
It's the Cadillac story.
It's the Cadillac
and grandma's coach. But we're way ahead of everybody else here. So you're an educator. Would you say you're an educator?
I was an educator, yes.
When you go back to the very beginning, before Ron Wilson, before you met Ron Wilson, before you met Diana King, why did you become who you are? Why are you who you are in the beginning?
So I was an elementary ed major. I got kicked out of a couple schools. I got kicked out of the gunnery, and then I went to Miss Hall's school in Pittsfield, Massachusetts. And my brother was ADHD. And so I always worried about kids like my brother, about how they were going to learn. And I became an elementary ed major, and I was appalled at the illiteracy rate. Back in the 80s, 64% of third graders were not reading to proficiency. And here we are in 2023, and now it's 67% aren't reading to proficiency. So nothing has changed, really. It's only gotten worse. But I really got into education because of that. So then I went to Florida, and I was teaching in Florida. And I was working at a private school, and they came in, and I hadn't had any OG training. And they said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "Well, I'm walking around and working with each kid individually on their reading." And they said, "Well, no, you don't want to do that. You want to be on sentence 3, the 4th word." And I said, "Well, if I do that, then I'm only going to reach about 2 kids." And they called themselves a progressive school. But anyway, they didn't hire me back the following year.
How old were you then?
I was in my 20s.
25,
maybe?
25, okay.
So
relatively early.
Really early. And they also, one of the parents saw me out on a school night in a bar, and that wasn't allowed. And I said, "But I don't have any children." Why were they out on a school night? But that didn't go over very well. So anyway, they didn't hire me back. And one of the parents knew of a teacher or a businesswoman out in Wellington, and she had a preschool. And she said, "I'd like to hire you to do kindergarten, and you can do whatever you want as long as you can justify what you're doing," which was amazing. And I still say that to everybody I train now. You can do, well, I tell them they can do whatever they want when they can justify it. Until then, they have to do it my way. But anyway, so I did that. And then my mom turned 50, and I had a big surprise party for her. And Ron Wilson, I've known Ron Wilson since I was 15. And Ron Wilson was her best friend. And so he was at the surprise party. And at the surprise party, that's when he said, my mom really wanted me to move back from Florida. And so he said, "Well, why don't you come work at Kildonan?" And I found my passion at Kildonan. And Diana was working in the prisons mostly. Then they had kind of skirted her out of everyday teaching.
So tell us about, before we go to Diana, tell us a little bit more about Ron Wilson. What year was it? So Ron had a beard, long hair.
Okay, so Ron Wilson used to be a teacher at the Harvey School in Katona, New York. And when I was in high school at Miss Hall's school, we had to do a January term where you did an internship. And so I went and did student teaching at the Harvey School under Ron Wilson, and he was a math teacher. I also did some work for a English teacher at Harvey School. So that, and I mean, I rode on Ron Wilson's motorcycle. I knew Ron Wilson before he was married to Bonnie Wilson. So yeah, I've known Ron he had long hair and a motorcycle. He was a badass. He's still a badass. He's just an old badass now. So
Those kind of educators.
yeah. So anyway, then I got to Kildonan. Do you want the Cadillac story?
Yeah, I want Cadillac story.
Okay, so
This is a job. Now you're going for a job. Now, I mean, it's all, Mom wants you living in the hood. She wants you, she doesn't want you out in Florida doing all kinds of crazy kindergarten stuff.
So Ron said, why don't you come up and we'll give you an interview at Kildonan. So it was April, because my mother's birthday is April 16th, and it had snowed. And I was from Florida now, and I didn't have any clothes. So my grandmother said, here, you can, she dressed me complete with a cashmere coat and a fur collar, put me in her Cadillac, and I drive up to Kildonan. And all these people think I'm like the newest, youngest board member because I'm just dressed to the nines. And I went in for my interview with Shirley Kokesh, who is so sweet. And she asked me what it would be like to be in my classroom. And I was like, well, I was so excited and so passionate. Everybody would be working at their own individual pace. And I would be walking around, and some would be on like cushy beanbag chairs, and some would be in the reading nook, and some, if they wanted to sit at a desk, I guess they could sit at a desk. And I almost didn't get the job because in order to really improve their handwriting and keep them focused, they should be sitting at a table, and their elbows should be on the table, and their feet should be on the floor. But I ended up getting the job, and then I found my passion. And I don't know if you've heard this story, but Diana, whenever Diana would come, everyone would scurry. I mean, everyone was scared to death of Diana, including me. And it was near the end of the year, and we were having backwards day. So I was much more svelte back in those days, and really liked to show off everything I had to offer. And so I had a magenta bra, beautiful bra. I'm sure my mother bought it for me because I couldn't probably have not afforded it. And I wore it on the outside of my outfit because it was backwards day. And then Diana drives into the circle at Kildonan, and I flew to the bathroom and changed my clothes really quickly because Diana would not have taken kindly to that. To this day, I still don't think she ever knew that I did that.
She probably knew.
Yeah.
She probably knew.
She knew everything.
She knew everything. Well, the other thing, for anybody who knows, so then there's the old Cynthia story. Anybody who knows Cynthia, so you guys were on the job when Diana never gave Susie a break. Never, ever. Always hard on her. Always hard on her.
Always hard on me.
And Cynthia, one time on a job, Cynthia's like, she said, damn. She said, ain't Ben the golden child, and Susie can't do nothing right. She was hard on you.
She was hard on me because she wanted me to be the best I could be.
And another thing, Susie's pretty humble too, if I may add, but I do wanted to say that we were just at this last conference, and somebody came up and said, "You're Susie Vandervorst. You're an icon." So she did say that to her, and I said, because you got the blessing of Diana. But okay, so now you're there at Diana's. Tell them about Diana. Tell them about Kildonan. Nobody knows about Kildonan or Diana yet.
Well, Kildonan was a great school. Every child got one-on-one tutoring. All the staff were overworked. Anybody who says that they're overworked, I'm like, if you didn't work at Kildonan, you don't know what it's like. Because we had to have a full schedule. Then you were a dorm parent. And then you had to do stuff on the weekends. And you had to teach a sport. I did hiking and camping. I would have on the weekends, I'd have all the boys over, and we'd have pajama breakfast, and I'd cook pancakes for them. We had a lot of fun at Kildonan and Dunnebeck. You worked hard and you played hard. So, and I started off in Wilson with Nick Edgerton and Paul Laughlin, and we were all dorm parents there for I guess they were like 14-year-olds. And then they moved me to Edison, and I was in charge of the baby boys, the 6th graders, and Carl Oppenheimer and I were dorm parents. Now, here's a funny story. I don't know if you've ever heard this, but one night, I love Carl, but Carl has a hard time with time. So I remember one time, many times, he would be off on duty and I'd be off duty, and he'd say, I'm going to just go check my mail. Do you mind if I'm gone for like 15 minutes? And about 4.5 hours later, he'd come back. But one night he called me in the middle of the night and said, I have a rat in my apartment. And so in my little Lawns nightgown, I ran over there to help him. And he's got his lacrosse stick. And he also had a little dog named Charlie. And he had a dog gate up so that and he put the dog gate up. And the rat, you know those little crisscross things on the gate? The rat got caught in one of those squares, and he put his lacrosse stick over it, caught it, put it onto a bucket, and then I put a bunch of we put a bunch of yearbooks on top of it and chopped off its tail. Anyway,
Chopped off its tail.
we did. And then George Murray, he was the
You guys call yourself educators.
right. He was the head of the maintenance, and he took that rat and took it down to the pond and let it go. I was like, well, it's going to just come back. And when I called the business office about it, I was like, we need to do something. We have rats. I mean, one of the rats knocked my dog food off, the lid off, and they were eating the dog food for my dog. And they said, well, you live in the country now. Those are just wood rats. I said, I don't care what kind of rats they are. We got to get rid of them. So that's a Kildonan story.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, so and just a little bit about Diana. While you're
Okay, so Diana was a force to be reckoned with. No one would ever think that I think she was only like 5 feet tall. But I always thought she was like 6 feet tall because she was just a force to be reckoned with. But she was pretty amazing. If you could get back past the fear factor, she really knew what she was doing. Because I remember she always would talk about handwriting, and I didn't really believe her. But I finally said to one of my kids that I could not correct their handwriting. Let's go see the old bag and see if she can do anything. And it was amazing. Within 60 seconds, she just watched what they did and she tweaked it here and there. And within 2 minutes, they had beautiful handwriting. And so I started taking all my kids down to her so I could watch her.
It sounds crazy what you just said. But so you were on campus. You were in one of the buildings, and you took her up the hill, or you took her down.
Well, she
her
was in the main office
Yep.
Downstairs, or just to the left of it, and I guess it was during Dunnebeck because that was really Ron's office. So her office was just to the left of where Ron's was, and I would just take kids down there. My tutoring room was upstairs in the old library. So, but it was amazing what she could do, and it was just from watching the kids and watching what they do. So that was the biggest lesson for me, was to watch.
So she was a natural educator, and you were a natural educator. And so when you guys kind of came together, and then she kind of mentored you.
Uh-huh.
So
And tormented me.
And tormented you too. But so now you're a fellow. She's like a Jedi in education. Just what? So just talk about who Orton Gillingham is and why they have a group and they have Orton Gillingham Fellows in the simplest way.
Well, the way I always tell my trainees is Orton Gillingham is the best way to teach anybody, but it's what our dyslexics have to have in order to learn. And so if you think about the academy, they have different levels. So the associate level is like a bachelor's of OG. And then the certified level is like getting your master's of OG. And then a fellow is getting a doctorate of OG. And so really, it didn't start out this way. But now, if you become a fellow, you really want to train others. So is that what you mean?
Yeah, that's. Well, you train kids, you train others. I mean, you are like this Jedi that just shows up, and you're training people at different places. You go to the schools.
Right. So my husband said a long time ago, he said, if you work with 10 kids, you're helping 10 kids. But if you work with 10 teachers, you're helping thousands of children. So I never thought I'd be a fellow, but I really like it. And I like empowering the teachers, because I think too many times teachers are sold a bag of goods, and they're, if you can't do anything else, you can teach, right? So many of our teachers just know how to follow a recipe book, and they don't know how to think for themselves, because that's how they've been trained, to just read it out of the book. But by empowering teachers and teaching them how to be diagnostic and prescriptive, they really truly fall in love with their profession and they become really great teachers. So I think that we need to do more of that instead of, for a long time, everything was teaching to fidelity, a scripted program. But if you're teaching to fidelity, a scripted program, you're only teaching one or two children in that classroom, because not everyone learns the same exact way. So, we have to really be diagnostic and prescriptive and learn to read eyes and read body language and learn what the kids are, what things they're really getting and what things need more review and more, cumulative back and forth, spiraling back.
They're Jedis. So how many OG fellows do you think there are now?
Well, I counted yesterday, and when I first started out, there were only 60 fellows.
Jedis.
And yesterday in the room, there were over 70 fellows, and that's not even all the ones that were there. But I think that we're now at like 150 to 200 fellows, and it is on the rise. A lot of fellows are now have FITs, which are FITs, but we need to continue to be robust in our training, not to water it down. I think it to be good at anything, you need to do it for at least 10 years. And I still truly believe that. I'm not the same person I am today that I was 10 years ago. I think I'm better. I'm like a fine wine.
Well, you also talked to me about, there's people were also talking about their pedigree of who begot them and who taught them how to do it. And so you brought in something like, well, not only while you're there at each different level, but you're supposed to bring something back.
Right.
To the craft.
So my feeling is anything, like even our children, right? Every generation should be stronger than the last generation. And so Diana was trained by Helene Dubrow, and Anna Gillingham. But Diana brought to it linguistics, because that was her passion and her background. Linguistics and history. And then I think I'm bringing to it all the science that has come. And I've told my daughter that, her job is to take it to the next dimension, because I think we're going to be entering the digital age and doing a lot more digitally than we do in person. So and I think it has to be constantly evolving and changing. If you don't, it becomes old and stagnant. So.
Well, Grace Sharma is now
doing right, yeah. Everything online, but she was doing it even before
the pandemic.
Right.
So, okay, and so interesting you're talking about this journey, because literally at the conference the other day, a kid walks up to you, an adult walks up to you, a teacher walks up. He wasn't a fellow though. What?
No, he was an associate member.
He was an associate member, and so this what's the story when the kid came up to you? What did he say to you?
So he came up to me and he said, "Are you Susie Sneed?" And I said, I am. And he said, "You were my tutor at Kildonan." And it was amazing. And now he's a teacher. So, and his mom was there. It was wonderful to see him. And he said that I was very firm and had high expectations, even my first year of teaching. So, because I didn't know what he'd say about me my first year of teaching, because it was a long time ago.
Okay. Well, and the thing is, when he went to Kildonan, just a reminder, that means he probably failed out of another school, and he
right.
came to this school because they could help him teach.
Right. And now he helps
learn.
And now he helps other kids. But the sad thing to me is that he does not tell his colleagues or anybody that he's dyslexic, because he thinks that there's still a stigma with it. And I said, well, then you need to come to Camp Spring Creek, because when you come to Camp Spring Creek, you feel sorry for people that aren't dyslexic by the time you leave.
Well, we're going to talk about Camp Spring Creek. I want to just talk about things of not knowing what people are going to say. So how did we meet?
So,
how do you think we met?
I know how we met. So we were in Indianapolis.
Yeah, I remember that.
And there were...
What year? 2000,
I can't remember what year
2004, 2006, something like that.
Something like
2005.
that. 2005. Yeah.
2000, something like that.
I think...
At a conference.
It was Indianapolis.
IDA conference.
Yeah.
2006.
2006. Okay, well, thank you for that. So it was 2006, and there was this guy. It was you and Orphala were both at the same conference.
Okay.
And they were the newbies. Everybody was talking about how whack job they were, both of you. You were running around with all these cameras. Nothing. We had never seen anything like that at OG before. I didn't know who you were, but I ended up being able to go out with some of the heads of schools, and we were in a pub with Ron Wilson.
Late at night.
Late at night.
Yeah, the after party. This is where the head wars all happen. This is where all the headmasters get together and talk about what's really going on.
Right. Yeah. And Rich Collins. Yeah, and there were a couple others, and I just thought, wow, who is this Harvey Hubbell guy? He is a riot, but he is also just way out there. And we hung out, we had a couple drinks, and then Rich walked me back to my hotel room where I was staying with Joyce Bilgrave. And at the end of the conference, I went to the airport, and we were delayed, and I was sitting with Harvey and his crew. And I just thought, oh my God, this is wild. And I never would have thought from that exposure that you would have become my brother from another mother. So, but that's how we met.
We got lucky. So yeah, Indianapolis, great year. Paul Orfila, Kinko's, the guy who created Kinko's, all kinds of crazy stories from that year. So let's go back in time to Kildonan. You're at Kildonan, but Kildonan, what is Dunnebeck?
So Dunnebeck is the summer program. Dunnebeck started in 1955, and then Kildonan started in 1969. I didn't start there until 1989, I think it was. My husband was there in 1984 as a counselor.
Well, it wasn't your husband. He was just some guy.
He was some guy.
He was just the best looking man.
No, actually, we did not like each other.
Oh, yeah.
At all.
I do remember that.
You remember hearing that? So Steve was really obnoxious. He would, if he didn't know anything about you, he would make it up. He started this rap sheet that he would put in every staff person's mailbox. At Kildonan, there was the staff room had all these cubbies. And he would put stuff in there, like, just alluding to things of what might be happening. So he did that. And he went up to one girl and said, oh, you know what? That guy over there, he really likes you. And then he went over to that guy and said, oh, you know what? That girl really likes. And they dated all summer. And neither one of them really liked you. I mean, I guess they did. But he started that whole thing. So I thought he was a jerk. And then at the end of one of our summers, we went to a lake, and at the end, I was like, oh, he's not so bad. And at the end, he said, how about you take me to the train station on your way back? So I dropped him off at the Katona train station. And as we're saying goodbye, he said, oh, and by the way, all that stuff in the back of your car, could you drop that off at Diana's house? I was like, what? So I had to go to Diana's house. I was still scared of her. And I had to drop off all this stuff. And she loved the Golden Boys. Steve was one of her golden boys. And, she didn't like me very much. She wanted to fire me right from the start because I had a lisp and I wore gold jewelry, and she thought it was a distraction. But somebody stuck up for me and said, just give her a year. She'll be okay. But she was gunning for me right from the start.
But she never got you.
She didn't get me.
And
then she called me her colleague by the end.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. And she told you she loved you.
And the very end, she told me she loved me.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So you talked about Joyce Bilgrave.
Mm-hmm.
You know which tree I'm barking up right now. So you camp out with Joyce Bilgrave in a dormitory. You hang out and sleep with her.
Well, what happened was Steve and I ended up working at camp. He was there.
How old were you? How old were you when you were working at camp and you met Steve?
So let's see. I think I was 26 when I moved to camp, to Dunnebeck. I went to Kildonan first. I was at Kildonan, and Steve was there from 84, and I was there from 89. He was there for 5. I was there for 5 years. He was there for 9 years, and 9 summers. And it's
a summer camp for kids who need to improve their
right, and it's a feeder for for Kildonan. I think Dunnebeck is for children with dyslexia as well.
Yeah.
It wasn't just struggling readers, but smart kids. And so we ended up getting married and moving to the Virgin Islands. And when we moved back to North Carolina, I said to Diana, we want to do camp again, but we don't want to do Dunnebeck because we had all our courtship memories there, and I didn't want them clouded over. So it was Diana's idea to send us out to Durango Mountain Camp, and we met, I think it was an Atlanta conference that we met Joyce Bilgrave. And so that's what we did. We put everybody in the car. We had 3 kids at that point. And
you had
dog.
your kids when you went up to Durango.
Yeah. And we had a cabin where there was a queen-size bed on the floor. And during the week, the kids would sleep in the bed with me. And on the weekends, when Steve got his day off, the kids would sleep on the floor and Steve would sleep in the bed. So he was the oldest counselor living in a yurt with the youngest boys. And we did that. And we hadn't been there 3 days when Steve said, we need to do this in North Carolina. So we started looking at it from a different lens.
Steve said that.
Yeah.
Steve said that. So you started off at Dunnebeck Camp.
I started off at Kildonan. But worked at Kildonan and Dunnebeck for 5 years.
And then you went out to, you went to the islands, but then you went to Joyce Bilgrave's, which are the 2 big camps for kids who are struggling, who have a great time at camp and they get their grades up. Then you guys all came up with the idea. You and Steve said we should do this down in the Carolinas. And she comes down. So you went looking for places.
Well, while we were at Durango, we called Diana and told her. And so we had driven out to Colorado. And Diana said, well, just stop by here on the way home. I was like, okay, that's kind of out of the way, Diana. But we did. And she helped us set it up and helped organize it. She was on the board for the first 10 years. We had her come down and look at this space before we purchased it to get her approval. And she said it reminded her of the original Dunnebeck in Pennsylvania, which we got to go and see in 2017 or 2000. I think it was 2017. She and I went on a major road trip.
I remember that.